Hello, hello. Welcome everyone to the Decisions Lunch and Learn on Wednesday, November 6th. I will be leading it, your host Gregory Goldston, and we are going to get started with questions in just a moment or two. So come on in, no need to rush. Let everyone get settled. Welcome, welcome all. We'll get started in just a moment. We will start this at the 12:03 mark. Now would be a good time to grab y'all's lunch. Oops, my bad. There we go. All right, we'll give it less than a minute. All right, that's our time mark. We'll be glad to accept any questions that anyone has. Please feel free to throw them into the Q&A section, and we'll be happy to start answering. In the meantime, while we wait on these questions, let me get into the decisions instance. Pardon me for just a moment while I transition over. All right. So I guess in the meantime, let's go over a current video that I'm working on here, and that would be the full text search video. This is going to be a course, actually, not just a YouTube video. And this is going to go over what the full text search is in a database, how you can use it within decisions, and how to enable it within both of them. So let me give a little bit of background on this. The idea of a full text search is that you are performing searches against an index created on the table that allows for a higher performance search and use of Boolean logic to bring up results. So for example, in something that would be enabled, I could say search for something, anything that has the word flow or rule in it. And right now I'm inside of my project, so it's only searching within the sublevel of my project and not globally. So I need to exit this and try this search again. Now if I try this, here we go. Active users rule, approver flow, anything that has the word flow or rule in it will return back to me because of this search. It doesn't have to have both in it, so you can use that Boolean logic. Additionally, searches are going to be more performant when this is enabled in your decisions environment. Of course, you have to make sure it's enabled within your database first. And the way to do that will vary depending on what kind of database you have, but it's usually a pretty simple process. How it works is the table gets created, then an index will be added to that table, which will then possess a catalog. And this catalog is going to be used to search up these specific terms and allow for this logic to be applied. Decisions, when installed with full text search enabled, will automatically create that catalog and index for you anytime you install decisions against a database that allows for full text search. That being said, if you restart decisions, it does not recreate that catalog. It still exists in the database, but in order to actually get the catalog reconstructed and rebuilt again, you need to upgrade to another version of decisions. This doesn't typically cause problems, but it is something to be aware of. So that would be the full text search functionality. Let's see. Not seeing any questions yet. So, yeah. Admittedly, don't have a lot on my project list right now. Just had the database changed out. But something that I do have, which I was talking about another time, was the start linked flow async versus the run flows for list and how they can be used, modified, and what each of them does. So I can give a little bit of an overview of that once again, if we wish. I feel like some of y'all were here for that already, though, so I don't wish to be repeating too much information. But if we're not having any questions, I'll go over it again. So, decisions has different ways that you can send a flow into an asynchronous state. There is a step itself called go async, which will then proceed to affect every step after this and will run the rest of the flow in an asynchronous manner and change the context from whatever user activated this flow to system. Now, a lot of people don't necessarily want to do that. They want to be able to contain their asynchronous logic and then proceed with the rest of the flow in a synchronous manner. And that's where these steps come in. The start linked flow async step and the run flows for list step. These two perform similar, but necessarily different processes. So the start linked flow async step is designed to run any subflow just as a subflow step would right over here. I will show it once it comes up in the favorites. Right here, same sort of configuration. The only difference is that this one, you'll have to wait for that subflow to complete before you proceed on. Start linked flow async, you do not. It runs it in asynchronous manner. Now, the way things are run in asynchronous manner can kind of vary a little bit. So, for example, if I can still pick it, I can run a selection time, but down here in this work queue, this is where this step is set apart from the other one. You can take in any data you want, just like a normal subflow. However, you can never pass data out of it. It will only ever pass out the tracking ID. And that's because what happens is if you run this flow, it's designed to run in the background, continue on with the rest of your process as you go forward, and then let this flow process and do whatever it needs to do. However, it can never pass out data because you have to set the data to pass out at the end step of this subflow. And this step is specifically designed to not wait on what process is inside of this in order to continue along the flow. So you cannot get data out of this. If we jump into this, I've got a delay step. It's 20 seconds. And the reason I added that is just so we could see what this looks like on the back end. Also, Christine, I see you just joined. If you have any questions, please let us know. I'm not going over someone's question at the moment. I'm just discussing some async behavior until we have some questions. So if I were to remove this, I'm going to save this, and this is my comparison flow, right? Let's confirm. Yep, that's my comparison flow. So right now, it says there is a thread count of 3, but it's going to execute once because, if I only run it once, it only executes once. So the number of threads it's split across doesn't matter. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to execute this 5 times, and then we're going to go very quickly, and I'll set it up right now, to the scheduled jobs, thread jobs report. So let's go back to that, and I'm going to run this 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Quickly get over to that report. And now you should see in here, we called the queue worker, right? So here we go. Worker 0, worker 1, worker 2, and worker 3. Now, when you specify the worker threads as we did in that other flow, we set the thread count to 3, but what that means is that we're going up to the number 3. It's treating it more like an index than it is an actual count. So it starts at 0, goes at 1, goes at 2, goes at 3, but we ran this 5 times, right? So it has to queue up another one of those runs behind the other threads that are running. That's why this one is right here. That's why worker 1 has 2 processes. In fact, it even shows you the order in which they're to be executed, and all these are the first one on the docket except for the second one that got added to worker 1. If I were to refresh this, that 20 seconds is definitely gone by now. So all these should be gone and processed out of the thread jobs. And you'll see if we go to the bottom, no more worker queues. So it ran in the background and continues to run in the background while the rest of the flow just completed. So that's how the the start linked flow async steps works. Now there's another one, not this one, I apologize. Aha, here we go. The run flows for list step. This is a little bit different, but it can achieve asynchronous behavior just like the start linked flow async can. The way this works is you pass in a list of data, and it must be a list. You can pass in a single item as long as that type is a list. The list can have one item, but it has to be a list. You choose what that input is, and if relevant, you choose the output. After that, you get to pick the run behavior of this. So synchronous would just run like a normal for loop. It will process each one of these items in a specified flow. So in this one, I've got a delay step, and then I'm just subtracting whatever number I'm passing into it, that decimal, by 1, and I'm outputting that here. You can think of it running it synchronous is just like running a for loop. It just goes around and around with each item through this list and eventually passes out an output of those items in that list. So synchronous just saves you a little space on your whiteboard doing that. Your thread job async runs more similarly to the start linked flow async step, where you can specify a queue name. The last one we called worker, this one's called customer queue, and this one the thread count. Now this thread count actually does match the number. So if I put 4, it would output 4 separate queues in which this is running. All right. And the number of items to process is based on the size of the list. So if I'm passing in a list of 7 decimals, I will have 7 separate flows running across 4 queues. Now, if I were to run this right now, just in the debugger, and look at the output, you'll notice very quickly that there is no output. And that's because it needs time to process this. Even if you specify an output, just like the start linked flow async, it's impossible to get an output from it because by the time it reaches the end step inside of here, this outer flow has already moved on from this step. It's not going to give you that output. Now, there is kind of a workaround to this. Let's say that we want to run all the flows asynchronously, not in order, but we also want an output still. We can change this behavior to async and wait. This will still split up everything into separate work queues, but the step will not proceed on until everything has been accomplished in those work queues. Now, this is going to take a little while because we intentionally set a delay step of 5 seconds here. So that'll help us see what's actually going on here. I'll give it another debug. It's running. It's running smoothly. And should be just about done. There we go. So we got our input and output data, right? Still the same numbers, 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32. I'm subtracting 1 from each of them, and I'm outputting that. Now, here's where things may look a little interesting. We have all the outputs, but they're not in order. Hello, Helmet. I see your post real quick. Hi, I pre-submitted a question, but I was late to the meeting. No worries. You're the first one with a question, so that's not a problem. Let me try and find that pre-submitted question right now, as I currently don't see it, but I can take a look real quick. If you also know it off the top of your head, would you mind putting it into the Q&A section? Awesome. Thank you very much. Let's see here. Where did that go? Actively searching for it. Hmm. I do not currently see the question, though I may have some more areas to check for that. If anyone else on the panel does see the question. Oh yes, that'd be great. Helmet, if you could just post the question into Q&A, that would be fantastic. And um, we would be glad to assist you with whatever that is. Let's say we got a lot more people in here now, so everyone else, feel free to post questions as well. We'll get to helmets first, but if anyone else has any more, they can line them up now in the Q&A. All right. While you work on putting that question into the Q&A, you'll notice that our list here, its outputs are not in order. And that's because what's happening is everything is being processed asynchronously in the background, which means there's no guaranteed output order of what you put into here. So you do get everything, in theory, processed faster because you can split it across multiple queues. However, you have to acknowledge that the order in which you get out your results will not be the same, which may or may not be a consequence that you wish to have depending on your process. All right, Helmet, let's see what you got. I'm going to exit out of this and we'll read your question aloud here. So, here we go. I'm trying to build an intermediary data storage table so that application A can write data to this table and application B can at a later date take action off this table data. Which type of data structure will be best for this type of persistent data? I'm going to let you talk real quick just so that we can get a little bit more context here. And here you go. You should be able to speak now. So
Hey,
you're saying, hi, how you doing?
good.
Cool. So what you're saying is that you have two different applications. When you mean applications, one being decisions, one not being decisions, or two separate projects within decisions?
Yeah, two separate projects within decisions.
Ah, okay. So you want one to be able to take action off of the table in the data. When you say take action later, do you mean like a scheduled job that checks it?
Yeah, so basically what happens is we have an application that manages our offboarding, when somebody's going to be separated from the company. And then we also have another application that manages like emergency response responsibility. So, there are people in data structures that are assigned responsibility. And so our business users wanted to have the ability so that in application A, when somebody is separated, their name and the date of their separation gets written to an intermediary table, and then a scheduled job that kind of exists with application B, it runs every day, looks to see if any of those days match, today, and then, strikes them from the data structures in application B. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. That absolutely makes sense. Okay. So there are a few different ways that can you can do that. I should mention that there's not one unique data structure you can do for
Right.
this.
But
And
I usually just kind of go willy-nilly with what seems best. So I just wanted to see what the professionals would say.
sure thing. So the data structure that you're going to need is going to be less I shouldn't say fully not based upon the persistence of it, but what matters a lot is what kind of actions need to take place on that data structure from a user perspective. So
Hmm.
if you want to be able to add actions to it later, if it's just something that you're going to store as information and just retrieve later to update, then we do recommend something that is not like a case entity, nothing that's going to have high impact on your server, like maybe something simple like a database structure, just not something that you need to be able to perform those actions on. Allowing one application to access the other one is also going to be based more upon dependencies than it is upon the data structure. So let me just make one here. I'll call this app A. App A. We'll create this. And then we'll go back and I'm going to make app B. All right.
Yeah.
So this one, I don't know what these are.
Version 9 looks so nice. We're still on version 8, sadly.
Oh, you're still on version 8, so you
Yeah, if
don't
it makes any
actually,
difference, yeah.
it does actually, because it means
Okay.
that you don't need to declare a dependency from one to the other. If you have two separate projects, you need to declare a dependency of project B on project A or project A on project B if you want the other one to be able to fetch data from that first project.
Yeah, and that's the thing is oh, I see what you're saying. Okay, no, continue. I got you.
Yeah, no worries. And then I'm bringing up something here real quick because this is just a better visual. This is going to be a better visual than me just trying to explain it, from thin air. So
Yeah,
let's,
yeah.
here we go. So we have different data structures that are available within decisions here. This is just our documentation talking about
Yeah, and
them.
I've looked at this, so I'd love a little bit more of an explanation. That'd be great.
Ab Absolutely. So this line I should mention is semi-arbitrary in the fact that it doesn't mean like these are ones that have no impact and these are ones that have a high impact. It's just kind of where that cutoff seems to be most likely. I think they're all going to have an impact on the database. You're adding data to it.
Yeah,
So you want to be able to store it in something that you can pull from later. A database structure is great for that because you can save it to the database directly. You can generate steps to be able to add, remove, update entities that are in that database.
hmm.
And it doesn't allow for user actions, like you don't have folder behavior actions that are going to be more costly. It sounds like you don't need to have process tracking
No,
involved with
no.
this. You're just updating it in the database. So this is a great way to be able to do that. An
Okay.
entity is also a solid way to be able to just store something and be able to fetch it later. Gives you a little bit more functionality as far as what actions you can add to it, but in general, these this line right here sounds like what you need because you need to be able to
Yeah,
save it to the database to pull it later. So a value list and a flow structure out of the question, but you don't need it to be able to perform all of these actions that like a case entity or flow execution extension would allow you to do.
for sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I think database structure seems exactly like what we need because, once we write that separation date to this database, there's a chance that, one of our they say, okay, actually his separation date is changed as a month date in the future. So we are going to have to make updates to it, but we don't we can run that off of other flows and not by user actions. So
Right. And you've got different ways that you can do this. If I guess I should mention that one way is to be able to just run a flow that connects to this directly because this should be a dependency if you're in version 8. this should be a dependency in all of your projects that you're building, unless you specifically like section it out.
And
Like you
and
should be
what do
able
you
to access this.
yeah, what do you mean by dependencies? Are you mean like, okay, this is a data structure that it lives in both application A and application B, or what exactly do you mean?
Well, because the line between applications is a little bit more blurry
Right.
in um, version 8 than it is in version 9. So in version 9, I cannot create anything in application B that is visible in application A unless I specifically tell it to be visible.
Oh, okay.
In version 8, if I create something, object version 8 doesn't have separate projects per se. Your projects are what you group together to upload it to the repository.
Right.
In version 8, if I create anything, it's accessible from any other folder in
Right.
that global system.
Hmm.
So if you wish to get around that, you could also use a query directly, but that's not something I wish to directly recommend unless
Yeah.
we know more of your um, structure and how all of that works. But it
No,
is something to consider.
yeah, I think it'll be okay if it's available kind of globally. It's not it's going to be a pretty limited use kind of thing. So,
Hmm.
no, that's great, and I appreciate the thorough answer.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Yeah, glad to assist. All right. We've got another question from Anonymous. With OpenID login, do I have access to URL parameters in on login flow after I authenticate the user? I might need to bring you in and unmute you to provide a little bit more context, though it is anonymous, so I admittedly don't know who this is. But let's see. With OpenID login, do I have access to URL parameters in on the login flow after I authenticate the user? After authentication. Possibly. Let's take a look at that flow real quick. So let's go to settings. Let's go to our, it's not login page, I believe. Is it portal? Look login. Uh, login flow. Might have to create from scratch unless we download the module. So let's go to OpenID module first. Let's start there, see what we're given, work backward. So I'm going to go to System, Administration, and then go to Features. And that should provide all of our different modules that come with decisions by default. And then you just got to pick to download. So we want the OpenID module for, I'm assuming this is for SSO authentication. If this is for something else, please let me know, but that's typically what we would use this for. Where is it? Did I already bring it in? Overview? No. Where to go? OpenID, OpenID. OAuth token service. Might have to set it through SAML module. Let me take a look there. Since it's the markup language, right? I don't see SAML. What is going on with my environment? Hello, yes, I see your hand raised. You have, here, I can allow you to talk real quick. Did you have are you the one that posed this question?
Hey, yeah, that was me. Yes, the use case is that, for example, let's say we have a SSO, let's say Okta, for
Mhm.
example, and in one application, there is a link to decisions that says that has some extra URL parameters. And when they click that, now what's going to happen, they will bypass decisions login because they authenticated in Okta, but on that login flow, uh, can I see those parameters where they came from? So for example, I want to go to department A, stuff like that. And let's say they don't have an account in decisions. So decisions will create an account for them And also, maybe if department A is not existing, I'll create a, let's say, folder in decisions with department A.
Okay, so you want to be able to track the URL parameters for what's coming in and then be able to allow the routing or creation of accounts and folders based upon if that source URL has already been created in decisions.
Right. Well, decisions will create an account for SSO automatically. But
Right.
yeah.
I guess more that there's a folder made for that account or like a dashboard or a home page if you're trying to route them to based upon that URL parameter.
Right. So either direct them to that folder, or if it's not existing, create that folder and direct them. Kind of like a landing page.
I see. I see. I will say that I will probably need to take a look and test out exactly what that login flow behavior captures by default. We can take a look by creating one real quick. Let's go to application A, the one that we just made. Let's go to flow, create flow, and we want advanced. Let's look for our login user flow. Yeah, let's try this. See what default parameters we get by default. User login info, email address, account ID, user identifier, instance ID, IP address. Okay, so the initial login flow behavior doesn't look to be containing that per se. Let's check another behavior real quick. I will probably have to build this out, but let's at least see if we can get you somewhere started, before.
Well, in SAML, it's slightly different on login.
Right, it's a different kind of. It should be a different kind of behavior. Where is it? Yeah, let me look into that. I will
Uh,
take a look into that module and start building that out. But
can
yeah.
you search for a SAML login flow?
I can search SAML, but it won't come up because I don't have the SAML module installed.
Oh, it's not here. It's a default flow. It's
Oh, you mean the one in the portal that gets created? Yeah, I can do that. I can do that, absolutely. Let's go back to our system. Sorry, back outside of here, outside of all the applications. Yeah, that's what I thought. I don't have it installed, so I don't think it got created. And then if I search login here, login user flow, that's what I just created. Login events history dashboard. And then all types we want flows specifically. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I don't think it's going to show up until I have that module installed. So I will get back to you on that. Let me try to put something together for this SSO login and see exactly what statistics are captured and let you know.
okay.
Yeah, absolutely. A great question, by the way. Let me we'll just play around with that a little bit more and figure that out just a bit later. And yes, Jeremy, I will make sure that I message you on the email as well. In fact, I've got a piece of paper right here. Let me write both of y'all's names down and then make sure that I can send an email to both of you guys containing that information. All right, cool beans. So I like to build a decisions node for my user that underneath the hood uses 3 to 4 other nodes. Think of it like a subtree in a flow. Is it possible to build components in this way that would appear to the user as a single unit? So I think I'm going to, this is a different anonymous attendee. And depending on what exactly you're trying to build by node, that's going to vary. So if you mean like it routes to one decisions instance and then splits between 4 different nodes, then that would just be installing a decisions clustered setup. You would set up a load balancer, distribute between the nodes based upon some user logic, configure sticky sessions so users get routed to the correct node if they've already been on it in their session. If you mean that users in decisions get routed to different I guess I need to understand what you mean by node. If you mean node by server or node as in like a separate distinct project, because if you're talking about that way, it sounds like what you want is multi-tenant, where there's one control. I don't have multi-tenant set up here, so it's a little bit difficult to show immediately, but I can discuss the architecture on it. So a decisions multi-tenant instance is where you have one base decisions instance called a control. All right. This control authenticates all users, logs them in. Any sort of authentication and login is controlled by this central node, if you can call it a node. Then you have separate decisions instances that are all tied to this node that have their own unique database, and users that exist in the control node can then be branched off to be admins or to be certain particular users of what are called the tenant servers that would be connected to the central node. Each tenant can be configured with its own flows and rules that are different from the central node. And when users log in, they will be either directed to the tenant immediately, if that is the only one that they have, or if they're in multiple tenants, upon login, they can drop down and select which server they want to access based upon what permissions you gave their account. Whoever asked that question, is that kind of along the lines of what you were asking, or did you mean something different? Because if you did mean something different, I'd like to really talk with you and understand exactly what you're asking here. And I'll give you a moment to answer that. Whoever the mystery user is. Ah, okay. Here, you cool if I allow you to talk? Cool. All right. There you go. All ears.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Okay, sorry about that. So I'm brand new to decisions, so forgive me if I use the wrong terminology. But the idea is I want to build like, like some sequence of decisions through like a decision tree. So not a multi-tenant, and I guess by node I'm talking about like the nodes in the tree. And I come from a data science background, so that's just the way that I'm thinking about them. But I may be the wrong terminology there, but whatever you want to call them, there's like a flow and it hits the first node, and then there might be some rule that decides to go like three different branches. And then within those branches, I may be doing completely different things depending on my business logic. And then let's say I want to figure that out and roll it up into like a node that to my users would appear as like a single entity. But if I were to look inside of it, there's like a subtree, right? Or there's some decision tree within there that they don't have access to. And the reason why I do that is to sort of simplify the use of it for them. Um, I guess number one, like, is that possible? Or maybe like given that context, or is there a better way to approach that kind of thing?
Well, it's first of all, to answer your question, yes, something like that is absolutely possible if I'm understanding what it is you're trying to do. So you want users to be able to access some app, be able to either fill out information or interact with it in some way, and then the stuff on the back end branches to different nodes based upon either that entered information or the user's permissions or something along those lines.
Basically, yeah. And the bigger picture vision is I'm not just going to build one of those things. I want to build like, I don't know, 10 or 20, and for various reasons. But then because I've kind of done some of the legwork up front to solve for integrations or like calls out to APIs or whatever the use cases are, Then I take that set of tools, which underneath the hood is all like decision trees, and I can present that set of tools to a user who then only has to think about the sequence of operations and not necessarily like configuring or building anything in the UI. I mean, they still do configure and build in the UI, but they're building with tools that I've built that consist of these subtrees.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, all right. I think I understand a little bit more of what you're saying then. So there are a few different approaches to that. One, and I'll just mention the first straightforward one is that, where is it? It may not be in data structures. Let me look for it. You can create, you can basically use JavaScript or other sorts of tools to be able to build custom, not, I didn't mean to hit that, custom flow steps that the users would be able to build with. So when you're talking about this, you mean you're trying to set up your actual builders for success, not the users who are just, you know, going through the flow each time. So,
Yes, exactly.
all right. So the most simple way I could think about doing that is to run a subflow, right? And you can pick or create this flow. You can have created flows in your project that users can pick from and input existing data to it and output it elsewhere. And this would allow an entire process to run within this inside of whatever flow they're trying to build. You can also set this to be runtime selection. And what I mean by that is, let's say that certain users are accessing this. You can have some sort of split string or truth table that inputs the flow ID of the flow that you want to hit. And it will go to that flow based upon what ID you pass into it, instead of just having a static flow that always runs with this step. So
Okay.
you're building flows upon flows. You have there's different kinds of branching logic here. There is match string, which I see a lot of people use, because what will happen here is, let's say that you have different for different environments like QA, production, dev, right? I've seen people use steps like this to say, all right, this is our HTTP, you know, for it'll be HTTPS for y'all, of course, but http/dev.com, HTTP / you know, QA.com, that sort of thing. And then they'll pick from here, select from flow data, and then they'll grab their base portal URL, match it in there, and they get different outcomes for different paths to follow based upon those criteria of who's running it or what environment's being run on. You can also have steps like this that match it from the initiating users or initiating user groups. So I can say that I actually want to run this based upon whatever group this user's in, if they match a certain one, or maybe a user specifically, their email. Like, we have different ways that we can branch off processes within flows. You can run rules within inside of these flows too. So if I create like a, actually, I don't want to exit out of that yet. I can create all my business logic within maybe a truth table or run rule step, and I can have those inside of subflows that branch off and choose different outcome paths. So conceptually, you can break off just from one flow alone. You can break off into so many different kinds of processes based on so many different kinds of criteria that you're looking to do. You can even match users to different dashboards to log into based upon their email address or user group alone. So they have access to different tools just based upon who they are.
So this flow unspecified would be like the subflow, and that's sort of where the thing that I described would sit. But then you can wrap this other logic around it, just like you're building a regular decision tree.
Exactly. Yeah. I guess conceptually, the decision tree is more happening not so much on the folder nesting level, but within a project, you are navigating users to particular areas to be able to use to input data, and that can be all based upon certain things. And even based upon those user groups, you can even map them to different projects. So these are all separate projects in version 9. These are just ones I've created for various reasons. And I could have one certain user group mapped to the validations project only, or they're mapped to the public folders on the validations project, which contains their dashboards. So they see all the dashboards here. Maybe another set of users only sees the dashboards from this project and has all the tools specified and created in this project. There are a lot of different ways to achieve what you're looking for, and it really is going to depend more on your specific use case than it is the concept as a whole, if that makes sense.
Sure. Okay, yeah, that does make sense. That is good to know. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. If you have any more specific questions about that later, please feel free to email us at trading@decisions.com. We'll be glad to answer.
Yeah, we'll do.
All right. We are about 14 minutes shy of this meeting's official end time, so I'm going to give another few minutes if anyone else has any additional questions. Otherwise, I'll just end this a tad early and you all can continue on with whatever you have the rest of today for. So I'll just give it one more moment. I'll navigate back to, we'll go to Lunch and Learn project, right? Couldn't hurt. Well, today isn't Tuesday now, is it? Or Thursday for that matter. I can change that real quick. I believe it's under Manage, Configuration, Settings. Yeah, here's where I can change that. There we go. Save that real quick. Cool. I'll take a look real quick for any sort not SDK extensions. OAuth providers and tokens. That doesn't really help with the SAML module. I'll have to look into that later, figure out exactly where that is. All right. I am not seeing any more inquiries come in, so going once, going twice, and that will be it. We'll wrap up for the day. Thank you all so much for attending. Appreciate y'all being here, and glad y'all had some wonderful questions for today. Hope you all have a great rest of your afternoon.